Well, one of those new announcements, we've already touched on it a little bit, but specifically, Pat Moorhead and Daniel Newman sat down with Sam Burd to discuss AI PCs while they were out there. And of course, they have all these new AI integrations. The news from Dell is that they're expecting this to create a super cycle of PC upgrades. Now, of course, if you want to learn more about that, if you're watching this as just a clip video, we did cover a little bit more about the new Copilot Plus stuff earlier in the episode. But what makes the market for AI PCs?
Yeah, Tom, I found this discussion particularly interesting, not just for the AI PC space, but for the wider space. Again, back to the point I just made, you got AI PCs, you've got native AI at the edge, you've got AI in the data center, you've got, of course, massive improvements in hyperscale and HPC. Um, the question is, we've already seen a super cycle, as the marketers would say, in hyperscale related to AI. There's no denying that there has been a massive spending on AI, especially around ML training in the hyperscalers, and that has driven NVIDIA forward like nothing else. The question of the hour, the month, the year, the decade is, will these other innovations also kick off a super cycle of investment? And I found this a particularly compelling discussion. Again, essentially, Pat Moorhead and Daniel Newman were talking to Sam Burd about this, and they go into some detail about this, but also, you can tell that these guys are really keen on asking that question and trying to figure out, will AI PCs, will native edge unlock increased IT spending? And because that would really, revitalize and revolutionize the entire IT industry, the industry that everyone in this audience is probably living in. And I think that there's a chance that it will. So my concern around AI PCs was the software. You can roll out all the NPU performance and tensor cores you want, but if you're not doing anything compelling with it, then it's not going to drive adoption and spending. I mean, look at Apple, right? They've had tensor cores, native NPU tensor cores, since the A11. That's over 5 years now. Have those have those hardware advancements driven customer adoption of product? I don't think they have. I think that Siri was compelling way back when, but that didn't need a tensor core. I don't think that Memoji and better classification of cat pictures was a force that made somebody say, I need a new iPhone. I'm going to go get me one of them, I don't know, A16 iPhone Pros or something like that. Now, I think Apple's going to remedy this at WWDC here next month with some new software features. But that just proves the fact that just having the hardware doesn't necessarily mean that customers are going to buy. My concern around AI PCs was that it was really going to be a hardware play. That's, Qualcomm would come out with a massive, a CPU that has incredible TPU, tensor performance, and they would expect, okay, folks, come buy it, and people would greet it with a big yawn, because what am I going to do with all that anyway? Well, Microsoft answered a lot of that last week, and Dell is answering that a lot of that this week, in terms of what the software can do to make these things valuable. Now, we do have some concerns about one of these, some of what we're seeing here. As we talked about earlier in the show, is it really great to have your PC be able to recall and search literally everything you see and do online? Is that a feature that you want? Well, it's an innovation, at least. But some of these other things, I think, might be more attractive to people. I think ultimately the message that people are going to respond to is the privacy message. And this, again, I think Apple will be banging this drum heavily. If you can do AI assistant things in a secure enclave privately on your device where the information never leaves, then that is a compelling feature. And I think, I expect Apple to talk about that at WWDC. Certainly Microsoft was talking about that. And certainly the Dell folks are talking about that as well. If you can bring some of these features that are productive, that are useful, that maintain privacy, that are natively integrated that just sort of work, I think that could drive a super cycle upgrade. So focusing in on this particular discussion, are AI PCs going to be a hit or a flop? I think they will be a hit. I think this is going to drive massive adoption. I think it's going to drive massive embrace of Qualcomm's ARM CPUs in the PC market, which is something we've been waiting for literally a decade. You know, when will the ARM PC finally come from somebody not named Apple? I think that these features that we saw in the next version of Windows absolutely could unlock a super cycle of upgrades for end users, for corporations, for the edge. And that, I think, will revitalize this whole industry. And it was all down to whether Microsoft could deliver the software or not. I think they will. But that being said, there is always the chance that we all just kind of drop the ball and fumble again. And I think a lot of people could look at that and say, you know what, I just don't need to upgrade. I just don't see the value. What do you think, Tom? Do you see the value?
I see the value, and I think you're spot on that Microsoft has come a long way. Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer would have never done this. This is Satya Nadella is doing. I think where you are missing a piece is it's not just Microsoft that needs to meet customers where they're at. This absolutely has to be driven by companies that are writing this software. And they face a really hard challenge, right? Because I can't assume that your PC has an NPU in it. I can do that on the Apple side today. Like I can say that if I write to a spec of a PC that was released in, I don't know, like 2021, I can guarantee you it has an M series core in it, and I can write my spec to that. I can just say it must run this version of Mac OS and it must meet these specifications because I'm going to leverage like the video processing cores. Like I will never go out and buy a brand new PC because it has a ProRes video rendering core. But boy, when I hit the point where I need one, I'm kind of glad that I have it. And that's the problem that the PC manufacturers are going to face with the AI PC. They really need to put these NPUs in there if they're going to be competitive in a market where everything else is an NPU. But they're going to have to eat the cost of those NPUs for at least the first year or two because they have to get them pervasive in the market before you can start writing software that will take advantage of them. Otherwise, we run this being the problem of Microsoft's Connect for the Xbox 360, right? That was going to be the killer app. And they had a couple of killer apps, like a karaoke app and a Star Wars game. And then they went on clearance because nobody really wanted them. Because it turns out that just like the VR craze in gaming or the spatial craze in gaming, if you can't sustain the momentum, you are going to have to eat that hardware cost. That's one of the reasons why doing all this in software is so easy for people to talk pie in the sky, is because the additive costs of developing this in software is negligible. You're already paying those developers. Why not have them write new code? When it's hardware focused, you have to eat the cost of that hardware. And I think that on the whole, PC manufacturers are going to embrace this because they need competitive advantages. And like you said, this conversation in 3 months from now is going to be a radically different one because we're going to see all of the software being updated across all the platforms to include the capabilities that are now inherent in all these devices. Will it kick off a super cycle of buying? It will if there's a killer app. And again, it comes back to the chicken and the egg problem. I, as an IT purchasing department, do not want to go out and refresh all of my users' devices unless there is something that I have to have them on that only works on this device. And there's no greater example of this on the other side of the fence than the brand new iPad that was just released, right? It's faster, it's better, it has all these features. And a lot of people who have a somewhat new device took one look at it and said, well, it's not good enough for me to need it. But if, let's just say, I'm spitballing here, let's say Apple announces at WWDC that you can run a version of Mac OS on an iPad, but it must be the M4 iPad. Bang, there you go. They've taken a chance that people are going to reject their assertion, or they could just have sold a million new iPads because everyone who's been clamoring for this software is going to go out and buy that. That's how the PC manufacturers will drive AI PC adoption. It's not AI enabled editing of my photos. It's not asking DALL-E to create a cat with a party hat on. It's streamlining the process. It's getting my system to the point where it can do the things that I need to do in my workflow, and reducing time or creating capabilities. Once it gets to that point, I think people will agree that maybe it's time to upgrade to a PC that has these functions or something like that, but not in this first wave. This is a longer timeline than just, man, we need to spike those buying decisions by the third quarter of 2024. You're not going to get that.
If I can have a last word on this subject, Tom, I want to go back to the AI factory concept. Remember, if the AI factory is a metaphorical factory that produces intelligence using AI software and hardware, it's important to remember that that AI factory does not live only in the cloud or only in the data center. That AI factory lives in each individual employee's desktop, laptop, phone, personal assistant device, etc. If they can push useful intelligence generation everywhere from your hand to the edge to the data center to the cloud, then it's going to be a major super cycle. If the AI factory is something that's going to be locked away in a data center in a hyperscaler somewhere, then it's not.